Hello YouTube, this is Nick, and today I wanted to show you guys how to use Ardour. Basically the basics of it, and this is not going to be an installation tutorial. However, I did want to show you what tools I'm going to be using. So obviously I'm going to be using Ardour. If you are on Linux, you can obtain it entirely for free, the full version for free, by downloading the package from your repositories. Almost every Linux distro has this in there, so you can just install Ardour. The only thing is you're basically getting this source code version because the creators of Arch Linux and the maintainers of the repositories basically just compile the source code and put it up here for you to download and install. It's also going to use entirely system libraries that you can see under these dependencies. Whereas if you use the ready-to-run program, one, it's going to be a lot easier for people on, say, Windows and Mac, and two, it's going to use its own bundled libraries, so you won't have to worry about library incompatibilities, possibly. The only thing about using either this version that you find in your repositories or building it from source is that they can't support that end result. So if you go to the support forums and say, hey, something's going on, how can you help me? They're basically going to say, well, your setup can end up any way because you made it yourself. We could give you more information if you actually used the version that bundles everything. They know how it all works, so it'll be a lot easier for them to diagnose things. That being said, I have actually went to the support forums and asked for help on this version that was installed via the repositories, and they did actually help me. It's just going to be a lot easier for them to figure things out if you are using the purchased precompiled versions. You can download a precompiled demo, but it won't let you export your whole track. So that is the software I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using the ready-to-run program. I personally paid $10 a month for it just because I love Ardour so much. But I think you can get a lifetime license for, don't quote me on this, maybe even $1. You just essentially donate to them once and you can download it and keep it forever. And then the other thing we're going to need is the LV2 plugins. So there's a group on Arch Linux, and I want to say Fedora has it as well. Maybe Debian and Ubuntu might have something similar. But just install LV2 plugins. It's going to come with a whole bunch of plugins, but the main ones that we're going to be using are the Ace plugins, which come with Ardour. We are probably not going to use any, but the CAF plugins are really nice. They're like a lot of post-processing plugins. I think some of the Ace plugins will do what the CAF plugins do. And then we're also going to use Dragonfly Reverb. Those are some really good reverb plugins. We're also going to use the LSP plugins, mainly for their multi-sampler. Are also going to be using Sample V1 for a sampler that allows us to basically turn any sample into like a whole instrument with different pitches. And the X42 plugins. We'll probably use a parametric equalizer from here, but they have some pretty nice post-processing plugins as well. So that's what we're going to use. Not really going to show you how to set it up because that's not the purpose of this video. Just going to show you how to actually use Ardour. So first I want to show you what a project, like a semi-finished project, kind of looks like. I just have a loop here that I made. Just want to show you kind of how it's laid out. Just play it a bit so you can see what kind of stuff you can make with it. And then we're going to try to make our own. Alright, so as you can see, there are just 3 tracks here that are audio tracks and 1 MIDI track here. This is just our melody, and then I have a couple of texturing, like basically perks that just kind of add some texture to it. And then I have my drums laid out here. So this is what it sounds like. This is actually the same loop that I used for the intro of this video. So this is what it would look like if you made something like that. So why don't I, first I'm going to set it back to kind of how it looks when you first get Ardour. Then we're going to make a new track. Or I guess a new session, I should say. So I just have a folder in my documents folder called Ardour, and that's where I keep all of my sessions. I'm just going to leave it unnamed because we can always name it later when we save it. Just create an empty template, hit open. Now it's going to ask you how you want your audio to be set up, and if you're on Linux, if you want to record MIDI and like microphone stuff, you might want to choose Jack. If you're just doing primarily like audio work, like manipulating audio files and just like placing out MIDI with the piano roll, and even some recording with microphones, Pulse Audio should be fine. I'll have a more in-depth tutorial on capturing MIDI from like a MIDI controller or keyboard, as well as recording, so we will use Jack in the future, but right now we're just going to use Pulse Audio. And make sure that auto start is enabled, because it needs to essentially start a daemon that will interact with Pulse Audio, so we want it to actually be connected to it. If this is left unchecked, then you're not going to hear anything until you go back into the audio MIDI setup and ask it to start it. So we're going to hit auto start and then start. And just to make sure everything's working, let's hear that metronome. Awesome. Now if you don't hear the metronome, there are a number of things that can be happening, but this is probably something you're going to want to do every time you create a new session in Ardour anyways. Go up to your window, drop down and hit not audio MIDI setup, hit audio connections. And this is going to show you how audio is being routed in Ardour. So first you want to take destinations and go to hardware. And this is going to show you basically what your default output for Pulse Audio is. So like mine is my headphones right now, so this is basically representing the headphones. And then there's going to be, if you go to Ardour MISC, you'll see Auditioner Out and Click Out. And we want to make sure that both of these are connected to our hardware. And then if we go under buses, we want to make sure that our master bus is connected to our hardware as well. Now if we go to buses and Ardour MISC here, you might see that the auditioner and the click out might just be connected to the master bus, which means instead of directly sending that output to your like headphones, for example, it's going to try to use the master bus to do that, which I've noticed sometimes doesn't work properly for those things because they're like built-in features of Ardour. And the auditioner is going to be for the list of our samples that I'll show you in a bit. It's not enabled by default, so you'll see what I mean. And click out is going to be our metronome. So it's important to have those things connected to your hardware so you can actually hear them, as well as making sure your master out is connected to it. Now, the reason you have to be very specific about this, in Pulse Audio, like when you're using Pulse Audio, it's probably not a big deal. But if we were to say, change it to Jack, it's connected now, and go to audio connections, you can see it's going to show you like every single one of your actual audio connections. So you're going to have to be a lot more specific, which, you know, can be a blessing and a curse. It allows you to, say, route just a specific track to a specific audio device. So like if for whatever reason you wanted to, you could have drums coming out of your headphones and, you know, a guitar track coming out of your speakers or something. But the problem with that is it doesn't really make assumptions about things. So let's say you were working with headphones last time, it's still going to be connected to those regardless of your default settings here. So you may have to, you know, go back in here and disconnect your headphones if you're not using them anymore and reconnect your speakers or whatever. So anytime you at least make a new session, it's a good idea to check your audio connection settings. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Pulse Audio because we're not going to be using Jack. And the other thing you're going to want to do, and you're only going to have to do this once and then it'll always be enabled even when you make new sessions, is show the editor mixer under the view dropdown. and that's this little thing right here. This is going to make it easier to mix things and edit our plugins without having to go to the Mix tab. It's basically the exact same thing. Like if I create an audio track here, just to demonstrate, and you can see that this editor mixer is just showing you which track is selected, the mixer for that. So if I go to the Mix panel, you'll see I see the exact same mixer for our Audio 1 track. And thanks to that, we will pretty much be able to make everything and like make all the changes that we need right from this very view without having to switch around panes. Unless you have something very specific to do, like maybe you're recording a lot of stuff or you're trying to do live usage. For the most part, if you're making a basic song, you can just hang out in the edit view, and with this editor mixer, never really have to go anywhere else. So it'll save us a lot of time. But I'll delete that track because that was just for demonstration. The other thing you're going to want to do is go to View and show the editor list. And this is going to be where we can find our samples to just drag and drop them onto the playlist. And this is the reason why it's important to have your auditioner connected, because when we play something from here and it's actually playing down here, we want to be able to hear the auditioner, so it's important to have it connected to your hardware here. So you can actually download samples from various authors that release them under CC0 and CCSA. However, I'm going to use my own samples that I downloaded from a couple websites, which I suppose I can show you. One is Looperman. Looperman has a lot of really good samples that you can just download and use for free. It's community run, and almost everything on here is like completely free to use for any reason. Honestly, if I want to just make something real quick, I just look through Looperman for a good melody that like resonates with me, pull it into Ardour and just kind of elaborate off of it, you know, add some drums, some texture to it, maybe, you know, some more MIDI on top of it, and then maybe some bass and stuff. So that's basically what we're going to be doing, is just taking a loop off of here and elaborating on it. And another website to use is WA Production. Now, they actually sell stuff, like they sell plugins, they sell sample packs, they sell construction kits to like kind of construct a loop that they made. So like it gives you like drum samples, the instruments used and whatnot. A lot of good resources on WA Production to help you make music, but their stuff does usually cost money, although they do have some free downloads. So check out both of those websites for sounds to get started. And to add them to Ardour, you'd want to drop this drop down in your list and hit Edit, and then press Add, and then just look for your folder that has all your samples in it. I already added mine. It's just under my home folder in samples, so it's going to be right there. And then once you add it, you can drop this drop down and press Samples. Now we're going to start with a loop. Let's say this one. And you can just click on it and you'll see it starts playing if you have autoplay check. I think I'll use that one, so let's drag and drop that in. And then we're going to want to use the grab tool here to just slide it all the way to the left. Now I'm also going to change the tempo. I'm going to change it to 110. And excuse the on-screen keyboard, I'm on my Steam Deck right now. And as you can see, visually, it's not 8 bars, so it's probably not going to sound in timing. So let's turn on our metronome and see. It's very off timing. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another one of these tools, the stretch tool, to stretch it out. Now just an overview of what all these tools do. They basically define how your cursor manipulates things in this playlist. So that's the stretch tool is going to help us take this and stretch it to 8 bars. And then we can just hit stretch / shrink. And now it should be in timing. Awesome. So now what we're going to want to do is add some texture to it. Now I found this like Foley perk loop on Looperman as well. Sounds like rings or keys or something, and I really like it. I use it in a lot of my songs. So we're going to throw that in there, and as you can see, it's also not lined up to say even 1, 2, 4, or 8. That's the timing we're kind of going for. So I'm going to stretch it out to 2. So make it just a bit longer and, make it more in time with stuff. So we play it now. Cool, it's in timing. Honestly, now we can disable our metronome because that Foley loop will kind of tell me the timing of it. Now the only problem is it stops right there and it doesn't keep playing. So what we can do is while we're still in the grab mode, I can press and hold Control and then just move the clip, and it's going to duplicate it so long as you're holding Control. So now it'll play throughout that entire time. Now I'm just going to add another one here that I got from WA Production. I think it's under Drum Loop. This one. I don't know. I just like the sound of it, and it adds a bit of texture to my tracks. So again, just slide it all the way to the left with the grab tool, and this one we're going to stretch to 8. Just give that a listen. It sounds in timing, but the textures are a bit overbearing, so we're going to lower the volume of them a bit. Alright, that sounds good to me. And this little slider right here is basically the volume of the track overall. You can see it also changes it over here in the editor mixer. So you're effectively just changing the mixing, like the overall volume of each track. Okay, so that sounds good to me. So now I'm actually going to create a looping region so that I can work on the drums and just have it replay a certain area so it's a bit easy to hear. So one, I'm going to show you how to edit this thing to get rid of all the stuff you don't really need, just because I usually do that. Just right click on it and it'll pull this window up that allows you to edit it. It's a bit hard to grab the window, there's not much grabbable space. I usually turn off time signature, usually turn off tempo, range markers, cue markers, and arrangement. I usually just leave the location markers, loop punch ranges, and bar speeds. If you want, you can do minutes, seconds, or time code, or samples, but I usually just leave the bar and beats on, loop punch ranges, and location markers. Okay. Now what you're going to want to do is just hold Control and just click and drag. Now I want it to be 2 bars, so when I let go, it's going to ask if I want to set the loop range or set the punch range. We're just going to set the loop range, and it'll put these markers here to denote that this is a loop that will keep playing when we use looping mode. We can even click and drag these markers, but I'm going to leave them where they're at because that's specifically where I wanted them at. So now I'll hit loop. This will hopefully make it a bit easier for us to develop our drums without having to keep rewinding. So why don't we do that now? So to add a new track, just find an empty space under all of your tracks and just double click it. And we're going to want to add a MIDI track. And we're going to use that LSP sampler that we were talking about. The multi-sampler. I'm going to use the X48 stereo version. Just hit add and close. And now you can kind of see the difference between an audio track and a MIDI track. An audio track, it's just the audio being fed directly into the built-in fader plugin. Whereas a MIDI track is going to have a MIDI plugin that generates audio that goes into that fader plugin. So if, say, we wanted to add some post-processing plugins, it's as simple as putting them in between what is generating audio. So like we could say put an Ace compressor here if we wanted to. And I'll just go ahead and leave that because why not? Oops. Now, to actually open one of these plugins, you can either right click on it and hit edit, or you can just double click it. So this is LSP multi-sampler, and you can see we have a variety of empty instruments here. So we're just going to start with instrument 0. We can name this if we want. I'll just call it kick. And you may want to disable keyboard capturing from Ardour. Sometimes you might have to toggle that if you've been doing a lot of stuff in here. It might get a bit weird if you're naming something, just because it's going to assume that these are keyboard shortcuts. So just make sure that this is disabled, and if it gets weird, just toggle it. And I'm going to call this kick. You don't have to name them, just makes it a bit easier. So double click on that empty region there, and we're going to find a nice kick to use. I think that one's good. And you can turn autoplay on here so that it plays sounds when you click them. Or you can just hit play here. And I think I like that one, so I'm going to hit open. And now this note, or this sound, is going to play when we press the note A in octave 3. So when we go to instrument 2, or instrument 1 rather, this is going to be our snare. I just like toggling it just in case. Call it snare, and I'm actually going to have 2 different snares, so we'll call the snare 1. And choose our snare. And this one we're going to want to have play on a different note so it doesn't play at the same time as the kick. So we're going to use A sharp of octave 3. And just to kind of show you what it's going to look like when you use these controls, it's going to give you visual feedback on what it's doing. Some of them you might have to toggle in order to use them, but we're not going to use stretch. Loop is the same, but we're not going to use loop. I'm just going to show you how some of these main controls work and how it gives you visual feedback. So if I say cut the tail off of it, you can see it's only going to play the sample up until there. If I say fade it out, you can see how that visual cone that it's shaping is going to manipulate the sound of the sample. But I just wanted to show you, so I'm going to set these back to the default. Alright, so now I'm going to want to add my other snare, and I'll do that under instrument 2. And again, we don't want this to clash with our other sounds, so we're going to do this on note B of octave 3. And I think we'll use that one. Alright, so let's actually use these. So to open the piano roll and look a bit closer at our tracks here, it's actually a lot more straightforward than you think it would be. There is no separate piano roll. Again, we're going to edit everything in this playlist right here. Just look more closely. Literally just expand the track and it's going to show you the piano roll. So to actually see notes on here, because this is just kind of an overview for playing because we're not in a MIDI editing tool, but if you actually want to see the names of all the notes here, once you go into the draw mode, it'll show you. And you can see in that same section, you can also expand your viewable region or shrink it. And we're just going to move it by clicking and dragging in the middle of that highlighted region to the later notes of the octave 3. So we'll have 3A or A3, A sharp 3, and B3. Awesome. So now that we're in draw mode, we can create a region by clicking and dragging. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to make it a bit longer than I need. So I did 4 bars, but now I can lay our drums out. So let's put a kick here, and maybe a snare here. Let's hear that. Nice. Now, let's say we wanted to move some notes. An easy way to do that is to use the internal edit mode. And so you can actually just click and drag to grab multiple notes and move them. You can also do shift up or down to move it up or down an octave. A lot of useful things that you can do in internal edit mode, but a lot of things you can also just keep doing from draw mode. Like you can move an individual note, so just keep in mind you'll probably be doing most MIDI stuff with the draw mode. If you need to do anything more than what draw mode lets you do, then you might need to go into internal edit mode. But let's go ahead and add our second snare. So I'm going to want to put one here, here, and I want to put one in the middle, but it won't let me. So we can either disable the snap here, so it'll just let me place it wherever, or we can change the timing so it'll snap differently, or what I usually do is I just zoom in a ton and it'll automatically disable the snap. So I'll put one right there, and let's see how that sounds. We'll use our loop so we can hear how it sounds when it leads into another piece of these drums. Awesome. But I think I'm just going to use this region here. I don't think I'm going to fill this later region with anything unique. So how we can trim that is we can just go into the grab mode here and just grab the end of it and drag it in. And then just like we did with these audio tracks earlier, we can just press and hold Control and move that region and it'll copy it. So let's do that for the rest. And hear how that sounds. Great. So now that we have the basics of our track laid out, why don't we start organizing some things? So first of all, I don't think I'm going to be touching these texture tracks anymore. Probably won't be changing the volume or anything. So I'm just going to minimize these. Just, like make them smaller. It'll remove some controls, but it'll also kind of get them out of the way because I'm not really going to be touching them much. And now let's make some groups. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can use this group button here and hit new group, or you can right click, go to group, new group. Or what I usually do, because it's faster in my opinion, is this black region right here is going to show you the groups anyways, and you can just click and drag across whatever tracks you want to be part of a group. So we're going to group this first track into a red group. It's just how I think of things, called the melody. And then we're going to group these two texturing tracks together in a yellow group. And just how I think of things, called texture. And this last track we're going to group in an orange group called drums. Awesome. So that'll make things a bit easier to understand what everything is. You can also just rename these by double clicking them. But if you have multiple things that are achieving the same goal, like these two texturing tracks, honestly, I'm not even going to rename them. I'm just going to group them together and call them texture, and I'll know from the name of the group and the fact that they're the same color that they kind of do the same thing. Now keep in mind, when you make a group like that, it's going to assume that you want them to kind of behave the same in terms of like if you mute or solo them. So if I say solo a texture track, it's now going to solo both of them. Or if I mute one, it's going to mute both of them, as opposed to normal behavior where it just does that single track. To disable this behavior, you can just deactivate the group temporarily by just clicking on the name of that group, and it'll turn like a gray color, and then it'll behave like how you would expect. But this is oftentimes desirable behavior, especially if they're trying to achieve the same thing. Like these, I basically want to act the same. If I really wanted to, I could even bake them into one audio track, so it kind of makes sense that I'd want them to be muted and soloed together. So just keep in mind that's the kind of behavior you can expect from grouping things together. So now that we have the basics of our track down, I want to show you one more thing regarding adding a track, but we're not actually going to use it. I just want to show you how to use it so that you can use it in different ways when you make your song. And that's regarding bass. Oops, did the wrong plugin. So there are a few different ways to do that. You can use an audio generation plugin, like, I don't know, I think SignGen might do that, I'm not sure, but like Odin 2 or maybe even Zinad sub effects to basically create a low frequency sine wave for your bass, and that works great. I actually used to do that all the time, but what we're going to do, so I can also just show you how to use a sampler, is use Sample V1. And that is a basic sampler that will allow us to like basically plug in a an audio file and use it like an instrument. So we're going to use an 808 here, and once it's loaded in, you'll see that it changes pitch with each key. And this is a little demo keyboard that the plugin actually has, but you can also see it'll play the same thing here. Oops. Like I said, I just wanted to show you how to use that. You can also use things like that, like the Sample V1 plugin for, like say, synth shots. So you can maybe use something like this for like an instrument, basically. So it's very useful to know how to use different plugins like multi-samplers, samplers, and actually knowing what they do and when to use them. So a sampler like this will come in very handy producing other things. That's why I wanted to show you, despite the fact that we're not actually going to use it. Now, I did want to touch on one more thing before we get into post-processing, because we're not actually going to be using it here, but if we were to actually structure this song out, you'd probably want to know how to do things like fade in and maybe even automation. So to fade into a track, you pretty much just find this little square up here. While you're in grab mode, just find this little square up here, click it, and drag it. And there you go, a basic fade. Now, if you want to do something more complex with values changing over time, you're going to want to use automation, but why don't we add some post-processing plugins to these tracks first so we can see how that's going to work with, say, another plugin. So again, with audio tracks, if you're going to add a post-processing plugin, you want to do it before the built-in fader plugin. So just right-click above the fader, go to New Plugin, and you're probably going to want to hit Plugin Selector, and that'll bring up this window here, which will show you all your plugins. You can say Show Effects Only or Show Instruments Only, and then once you know the plugins that you use a lot that you like, just go ahead and hit this check next to them, so you'll add them to your favorites. And that's actually how I'm going to be adding these plugins, because I favorited them. So New Plugin, Favorites, and first I'm going to add a Dragonfly Hall Reverb to my melody. This is a really high quality reverb plugin, and it's just going to add a bit of life to our melody. So let's hear what that sounds like with the reverb and without it. So this is with. And as you can see when I pause it, there's a little bit of a tail on the end, a bit of decay before the audio actually stops playing. And that's just the reverb, the simulation of being in a room or a hall, just kind of decaying over time as it kind of echoes out, I guess. Reverb. So to disable it, we can click this little green enable button there, and let's hear it without it. And as you can see, there's no tail, no decay to the audio. It just stops immediately. So let's re-enable it because we do want it there. And then let's say add a parametric EQ to our drums. I'll add that before the compressor. So as you can see, I'm going to use the X42 EQ, parametric equalizer, stereo version. Double click on it. And to get live information about what I'm hearing and where those frequencies lie on here, we can go under spectrum and change it to either spec or hist. Both will work, they just give you a bit different information. As you can see, this is what spec looks like, this is what hist looks like. Just kind of a preference, but they'll give you an idea of what frequencies you need to adjust. So I'm going to add a bit of bass here, some lower frequencies, maybe some of the higher frequencies. And that sounds good to me. And as you can see, like that compressor that we added earlier, it also has settings, but one of the great things about Ardour is even with third-party plugins, so long as it's supported, they can have inline displays. So we don't necessarily have to look at this to find out what's going on. We can just glance in the editor mixer and it'll show us. If anything crosses that red line, it's being compressed. Now that we have some post-processing plugins, why don't we talk about automating them? So let's say I wanted to automate one of the values in this parametric EQ. What I can do is I can click on this little automation button here. Go to Processor Automation, and like I said, I want to edit the parametric EQ on here, and then I can just select any of the controls that I want to automate over time. So let's say I just want to do the gain, and then basically to actually change those values over time, I'm just going to use the draw tool. And just to demonstrate, I'll just draw a wacky line here. And you'll see over time these values will change as they pass them with the playhead. So that's a basic overview of automation. I'm going to go ahead and remove that automation because I don't actually want it. And just make sure it actually got rid of all the... Did not get rid of all the data, so let me just delete all that data first. So that's a basic overview of automation. So that can help you get a bit more granular about what it is you want to change over time. Like let's say you want to use a low pass filter to slowly fade in your song. You can just automate the low pass filter and raise or lower a value over a period of time. Now there's a bit more to cover regarding like recording and recording MIDI, and some more controls to play with, but honestly everything that I've shown you in this tutorial should be enough to get you started. I'll probably have other tutorials on those other things, but you should be able to make a full track of what you want, maybe a basic track at that, but this should be enough to get you up and going. So hopefully you guys found this information helpful. I tried to make it from the point of view of someone who's fairly new to music production, or maybe coming from FL Studio or Ableton and expecting to have everything like already there for you. Ardour relies on a lot of third-party plugins, so you kind of have to actually know what those plugins are and how to use them. Like FL Studio doesn't call their multi-sampler for like their drums a multi-sampler. They just have like a drum loop maker thingy. So it's kind of hard to come to Ardour and not know what those things are. But actually learning what each plugin does, all of these ones are free and easy to install all of them at once, so they're almost like default plugins, but you do kind of have to know what you're doing. So hopefully it's going to make you a bit more of a well-rounded music producer anyways. So I hope all of this information was valuable to you. If it was, hit that like button. If you guys make an absolute banger, please share in the comments. I want to hear that. And I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic day.